Iron Mike Tyson. He once got into a street fight with another heavyweight by the name of Mitch Blood Green. Now you'll want to stay tuned for this one because it involves a 40 ounce, a bicycle, Fat Joe, a Rolls Royce, and a gas station robbery. Yeah, it's a crazy story, but first, intro reel.
You are watching Chase McG. Like and subscribe. And if you like the shirt, it's in the description.
Now, where do I even begin with this story? We know that it took place in Harlem in 1988, and Mike Tyson and Mitch Green were involved. It took place right outside of a place called Dapper Dan's. Now, Dapper Dan's is kind of famous in New York City. It's kind of a place where well-to-do black dudes get clothes. I'm going to go over all the versions of this story because there's a Mike Tyson version, there's a Mitch Green version, and then there's a Dapper Dan's night manager version. So I'm going to go over all these things and try to decipher who I think was telling the truth or whatnot. Now we got to talk about Mitch Green a little bit because I feel like his backstory kind of plays into why this fight actually happened. Because Mitch Green was about that life. He was quite the gangster. He's got multiple arrests for doing some gangster stuff. So first we'll start with Mitch Green here a little bit. Now Mitch Green got arrested for robbery and grand larceny. And he robbed a gas station once. And I know what you're thinking. There's only one real way to rob a gas station. And that's not exactly how Mitch Green robbed the gas station. He did it in a very unconventional way here. See, he went to a gas station and it was one of those gas stations where you like put the gas in first and then pay. So Mitch filled up his Lincoln, went into the store, told the clerk, hey, I'm not paying for any of this. They get into it a little bit. Now Mitch is like a 6'5" big boxer guy. So, you know, he's pretty big, you know. The guy ends up running out of the gas station. And what Mitch decided to do was take people's gas and act like he was the clerk all of a sudden. So people would come in, put gas in the car and be like, hey, here's that $20 for the pump or whatever. And Mitch would take their money. So Mitch is in this gas station taking this money. As the attendant ran out, he ended up calling the police from a payphone somewhere. So the attendant runs back to the gas station and he sees Mitch about to take money from a cab driver. So the gas station attendant yells out, hey, this guy's not an employee here. He's just a random lunatic taking people's money. The cab driver takes his money away from Mitch and Mitch ends up punching him. And so they get into it a little bit, and that is the exact moment when the cops actually pull up. They see him beating up this cab driver as they pull up on the scene. I've never heard of anyone robbing a gas station like this before, and I gotta give him points for that. I mean, that's pretty creative way to rob a gas station if you're gonna do it. I mean, you're not gonna make a lot of money probably by the time the cops get there, but like, it's pretty creative. Mitch also had a crazy crime of having a suspended license. And I know what you're thinking. That's not really a significant crime. Regular people get suspended licenses all the time. But Mitch, according to the LA Times, got his license suspended 54 times, which begs the question, how did he still have a license to be suspended 54 times? I mean, even for the 80s, 54 times? Now, I also have to bring Fat Joe into the story. Now, Fat Joe told a story about Mitch Green. He said that back in the day,
They're on 132nd and Park Avenue, Bronx. Now, I've never been to this area. I've only seen it on Google Maps, but it definitely don't look sweet around here.
he said he used to see Mitch Green pedaling down the street on his bike with a 40 ounce. And Mitch Green used to be like, hey, one day I'm gonna fight Mike Tyson and I'm gonna be heavyweight champion of the world. And Fat Joe said him and his homies used to look at him and be like, oh, come on, man, get out of here. You're gonna be a heavyweight champion. You come around the Bronx on your bicycle with your 40 ounce in your hand talking about you are gonna be heavyweight champion. And he's like, yeah, I'm gonna be heavyweight champion and I'm gonna beat Mike Tyson and do it. So now that I've given you a little history on Mitch Green, now we're going to get into this Mike Tyson street fight. Now, Mitch Green was really obsessed with Mike Tyson. I know this because every time I found an interview with him in the 80s, all he could talk about was Mike Tyson. He didn't talk about anything else. He either talked about beating up Mike Tyson, and sometimes, occasionally, he'd talk about beating up Don King and how Don King owed him money. They fought one time about 3 years before that in the ring, and Mike Tyson won that by decision. It was a pretty easy fight for Mike Tyson. Mitch stood up the whole time, but he was getting punched the whole fight. So, kudos to him for standing up, because at that time, not a lot of people stood up fighting Mike Tyson. But Mitch would just go on and on about Mike Tyson, and he would call him stuff like Michelle Cecily Tyson, like the actress Cecily Tyson. But he would call him Michelle Cecily Tyson, and then he'd say a lot of homophobic things. And then he would always look at his biceps and kiss them like, yeah, I'm a real man, and he'd kiss his thing, unlike Mike Tyson. Mitch Green wasn't really making a lot of money at this time. So I could just imagine he sees the Rolls Royce and he sees Mike Tyson inside Dapper Dan's, probably getting some Gucci influence. And I can just imagine how he must have felt at that moment. Now, according to Mitch Green, he tries to have a conversation with Mike Tyson, and Mike Tyson ends up sucker punching him out of nowhere, and Mike Tyson's entourage ends up grabbing Mitch Green as Mike Tyson runs away from him. I find it hard to believe that story. It doesn't make any real sense. But, that's his story. He's sticking to it. Now, according to Mike Tyson said he was going into Dapper Dan's. It was about 4 a.m. He said he had his entourage there. They're having a good time. They're laughing. The next thing you know, the laughing stops. He looks up, and there's Mitch Green. Now, according to Mike Tyson, Mitch Green looked like he was high on angel dust. Mitch Green walked up to him and was just like, hey, what you doing in my hood, little N-word? What you doing? What's going on? Hey. He's getting all confrontational with him. At first, Mike Tyson said he wasn't trying to fight him until Mitch Green started grabbing him. And apparently he ripped part of his shirt and tried to go in his pocket. And that's when Mike Tyson said, hey, let's take this outside. He said as they're going outside, Mitch Green is just yelling at him, calling him a bunch of homophobic slurs and saying, you ain't ish, N-word, and all this stuff. They get outside, and there's apparently a couple of people outside, and they start getting down. And Mike Tyson said he'd punch him. Mitch Green would hit the ground, randomly get back up because he was high on angel dust, and you know how that gives you strength. And so then he'd start punching him, and then he'd go down again, and then he'd get back up like a zombie out of nowhere, ready for some action. So that finally he hit him, and he stayed down for a while, and he said, okay, it's time to get out of here. Apparently Mike and his entourage make it to his Rolls Royce. They get in the Rolls Royce. They try to drive off, and again, the zombie gets up. He runs over to the car, and he punches the side mirror off. Apparently the entourage is in the back seat trying to reason with Mike, like, hey man, forget about it. Let's get out of here. Let's just forget about it. You can get another mirror in the morning. And Mike Tyson's like, pull over. So they pull over, and then Mike Tyson finally ends the fight. He knocks him down for good one time. His head actually ended up bouncing off the concrete as he's falling on the ground, and Mike Tyson thought, oh, ish, I killed him. Let's get out of here. And they sped off. Mike Tyson said his hand was like really messed up, and he could tell something was wrong, so they ended up going to the ER. Turns out his hand was broken. He said the next day he ends up opening the paper, and then boom, there's Mitch Green, still alive, and he was very relieved that he didn't kill Mitch Green in the streets of Harlem. Anyways.
This would have been one of those great Law and Order episodes. I don't know if y'all watch Law and Order like I do, but like every now and then Law and Order will have an episode where it's clearly based on something that happened to a celebrity. Coming up next on a new Law and Order, Harlem, starring Idris Elba as the old seasoned veteran. There's nothing like the smell of blunt force trauma in the morning. Hey, what do we got? Starring a freshly worked out Michael B. Jordan, who's purely here for the woman demographic.
African-American male, 6'5",
Witnesses said they heard an argument, a homophobic slur, and then a big thud hit the ground. What is this, oil? Is this oil on the ground?
Actually, that's juice from a Jerry curl.
There's also a side mirror on the ground over there. That's no average side mirror. This is clearly from a Rolls Royce. You know who this is, right? No, not the slightest. It's Mitch Blood Green, the boxer. Was he any good? I mean, he was cool. He was cool. Well, I guess he's down for the count.
But anyway, so now we're going to get into the Dapper Dan version. Dapper Dan manager ends up backing up Mike's story. He said Mitch Green came in very confrontational. It was very scary. And he said he did concur that, like, Mitch Green did grab him and rip his shirt a little bit, and Mike was defending himself. He said something interesting, though. He said Mike was hitting him, and Mitch Green ended up hitting the ground. And as he's on the ground, he said Mike was grabbing him and punching him again and again and again, making sure he stayed down for the second time. So, yeah, that was the only difference. And he said Mitch Green's legs ended up going, like, way in the air out of nowhere. So, basically, Mike Tyson's story ends up lining up with the manager of Dapper Dan's. And this is like 1988, so it's before cell phone footage and all the CCTV stuff wasn't around then. If it would have happened now, it would have been all over TMZ and everything. But this was the 80s, man. So we don't really know what fully happened. Now, we all know who won the fight, because clearly Mike Tyson's hand is broke and Mitch's eye is bolted shut. I mean, we got a pretty good idea how that fight turned out. But, like, you know, but according to Mitch Green, Mike Tyson sucker punched him. So, hey, you know, that's his story. He's sticking to it.
Now later, Mitch Green tried to sue Mike Tyson for this incident. He tried to sue him for about $25 million. Judge said that's ridiculous, but I will give you 40 grand for your trouble there. So it was a nice little come up. He got 40 grand for this incident.
That's the time when Mike Tyson and Mitch Green ended up getting into a fight. And also, I have to mention that Mitch Green has gotten his life together, and he is now a minister. I like to see that the brother has evolved from what he used to do into what he's doing now. So it's nice to see that evolution. So shout out to Mitch Green, man, getting his life back together. I'm at the end of the story. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe. Have a nice day, y'all.